April 12, 2024. Brookhaven County Juvenile Court, Ohio. A 17-year-old girl named Lily Hartwell sat in the defendant's chair, her orange jumpsuit stark against the wood paneling of the courtroom. Her white undershirt was visible at the collar. She clutched a tissue in trembling hands, her face buried in her palms as sobs racked her small frame. For Lily Hartwell, this wasn't justice. It was a performance. Every tear had been rehearsed. Every breakdown had been timed. She had practiced her expressions in the mirror, studied videos of grieving teenagers online, and perfected the art of looking vulnerable while checking to see if the cameras were watching. She was charged with tampering with evidence, a minor crime that suggested nothing of the brutal, premeditated murder she had committed. But investigators had found something. A single audio recording made 6 hours before she killed her mother would destroy everything. In that recording, Lily's own voice would betray her. By the time Judge Margaret Sullivan spoke her name for the last time, the performance would be over. The mask would fall, and Lily Hartwell would face the truth she had tried so desperately to hide. The courtroom was packed. Media cameras lined the back wall. Reporters filled the gallery, notebooks ready. This was the kind of case that captured attention. A teenage girl, a dead mother, questions of abuse, accident, or something far darker. Lily's defense attorney, Marcus Webb, a silver-haired man in his 50s, sat beside her with a carefully neutral expression. He had handled juvenile cases for 20 years, but something about this one troubled him. Something about the way Lily could turn her tears on and off like a faucet. On the other side of the aisle sat prosecutor Rachel Brennan, a sharp-featured woman with steel-gray eyes and a reputation for meticulous preparation. She had reviewed the evidence 3 times. She had interviewed every witness personally. And she had listened to the recording that would destroy Lily's performance. She just had to wait for the right moment to reveal it. Judge Margaret Sullivan entered the courtroom, her black robe flowing behind her. She was a veteran of the bench, 62 years old, with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. She had seen manipulators before. She had watched guilty defendants perform innocence. But she believed in the process. She believed in evidence. And she would let the trial unfold as it should. All rise, the bailiff called. The courtroom stood. Judge Sullivan took her seat and gestured for everyone to sit. She looked at Lily, who was still sobbing into her tissue. The judge's expression remained neutral, but she noticed something. Lily's eyes, when they briefly lifted from the tissue, flicked toward the media cameras. Just for a second. Then the sobs resumed. "We are here today for the arraignment of Lily Marie Hartwell," Judge Sullivan said, her voice clear and firm. "Miss Hartwell, you are charged with tampering with evidence related to the death of your mother, Catherine Hartwell. How do you plead?" Marcus Webb stood. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty to all charges." Lily let out a loud, theatrical sob. Her shoulders shook. Her hands covered her face. But Judge Sullivan noticed that when Lily lowered her hands slightly, her eyes were dry. The tears came only when the tissue pressed against her face. Prosecutor Brennan rose to her feet. "Your Honor, the state believes the evidence will show that this case involves far more than tampering. We believe the evidence will demonstrate premeditation, planning, and a calculated effort to deceive investigators. We ask that the defendant be held without bail pending trial." Marcus Webb objected immediately. "Your Honor, My client is a 17-year-old girl who has just lost her mother in a tragic accident. She is grieving. She is traumatized. The state's suggestion of premeditation is baseless fear-mongering designed to prejudice this court against a child. Your Honor, Brennan continued, her voice steady. The timeline of events in this case does not support the defendant's claim of an emotional accident. We have evidence that contradicts her statement. We have digital evidence that suggests planning. And we have reason to believe the defendant poses a flight risk. Judge Sullivan considered this. She looked at Lily, who was now staring at the prosecutor with an expression that was difficult to read. Was it fear, or was it anger? Bail is denied, Judge Sullivan said. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. We will reconvene in 2 weeks for a preliminary hearing. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck. Lily's performance reached a crescendo. She collapsed against the defense table, wailing. But as the bailiffs approached to escort her out, Judge Sullivan saw it again. That quick glance at the cameras. That calculation behind the tears. Detective Paul Ramos sat in the back of the courtroom, watching. He was a 47-year-old veteran of the Brookhaven County Sheriff's Department, with 23 years of experience and a reputation for solving difficult cases. He had been the first detective on the scene when Catherine Hartwell's body was discovered. He had interviewed Lily within hours of her mother's death, and he had suspected, from the very beginning, that something was wrong. Catherine Hartwell had been found in the kitchen of the family home, dead from multiple stab wounds. Lily had called 911 hysterical, claiming she had found her mother like that. But the timeline bothered Ramos. The medical examiner estimated time of death between 3 and 4 in the afternoon. Lily claimed she had been at a friend's house until 5, but surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera showed Lily's car in the driveway at 2:30. She had been home. She had lied. Ramos had obtained a warrant for Lily's phone. What the forensics team found would change everything. 2 weeks later, the preliminary hearing began. The courtroom was even more crowded than before. The case had gained national attention. A teenage girl accused of killing her mother. The details were salacious, tragic, and perfect for cable news. Lily entered the courtroom in her orange jumpsuit, her face puffy from what appeared to be hours of crying. She moved slowly, as if every step required enormous effort. She sat beside Marcus Webb and immediately began crying again, her shoulders shaking, her hands trembling. Marcus Webb stood and addressed the judge. Your Honor, my client is a traumatized child. She loved her mother. The suggestion that she could harm her is not only false, it is cruel. What happened that day was a terrible accident, an argument that escalated, a moment of panic. My client is devastated by what occurred. She will carry this guilt for the rest of her life. But this was not murder. This was a tragic mistake. He gestured toward Lily, who sobbed louder. Look at her, Your Honor. Does this look like a cold-blooded killer? This is a child in pain, a child who needs counseling and support, not prosecution and imprisonment. Prosecutor Brennan rose. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were hard. Your Honor, the defense would have you believe this was an accident, but accidents do not require planning. Accidents do not involve deleted phone records. Accidents do not require rehearsal. Lily's head snapped up. For just a moment, her tears stopped. She stared at the prosecutor with something that looked like fear. Then the crying resumed. Even louder, Brennan continued. The state will present evidence that Lily Hartwell's story is a fabrication. We will show that she was home at the time of her mother's death, despite claiming otherwise. We will show that she deleted critical data from her phone in the hours after the killing. And we will show that this was not an accident. This was murder. Judge Sullivan looked at both attorneys. Proceed with your evidence, Prosecutor Brennan. The first witness was Detective Paul Ramos. He took the stand, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Brennan approached him with a folder of documents. Detective Ramos, can you describe the scene you encountered on the afternoon of April 10th? Ramos nodded. I arrived at the Hartwell residence at approximately 5:45 in the evening. Officers were already on scene. I entered through the front door and proceeded to the kitchen, where the victim, Catherine Hartwell, was found deceased. She had sustained multiple stab wounds to the chest and abdomen. There was significant blood loss. The weapon, a kitchen knife, was on the floor near the body. Where was the defendant when you arrived? She was in the living room with 2 officers. She was crying, hysterical. She kept saying she found her mother like that. She said she had been at a friend's house and came home to find her mother dead. Did you believe her? Marcus Webb objected. Calls for speculation, Your Honor. Sustained. Rephrase. Prosecutor Brennan. Detective Ramos, did anything about the defendant's statement strike you as inconsistent? Yes. She said she arrived home at 5 and called 911 immediately, but the call came in at 5:07. I wondered what took 7 minutes. I also noticed her hands were clean. No blood. If she had checked her mother's pulse or tried to help her, there would have been blood. Lily sobbed louder. Judge Sullivan glanced at her, then back at Ramos. What did you do next? Brennan asked. I obtained a warrant to search the home and to examine the defendant's phone. I also requested surveillance footage from neighboring homes. What did the surveillance footage show? It showed the defendant's car arriving at the residence at 2:33 in the afternoon, not at 5, as she claimed. She was home at the time of her mother's death. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Sullivan banged her gavel. Order! Lily's crying became louder, more desperate. She looked at the jury, her eyes wide and pleading. But several jury members were looking at her with suspicion now. Marcus Webb cross-examined Ramos, trying to poke holes in his timeline. Detective, is it possible the defendant came home briefly and then left again? We checked footage from multiple cameras along her route. Her car did not leave the property again until after the 911 call. Is it possible the timestamp on the surveillance footage was incorrect? We verified the timestamps with multiple cameras. They were accurate. Webb's frustration was visible. He returned to his seat. Lily clutched his arm, whispering frantically. He shook his head and whispered back, but his expression was troubled. The next witness was Catherine Hartwell's sister, Margaret Chen. She was a 52-year-old woman with graying hair and red-rimmed eyes. She had been crying, real crying, not the performed variety. She took the stand and looked at Lily with an expression of profound sadness. Miss Chen, Brennan began gently. Can you describe your relationship with your sister? Catherine was my best friend. We talked every day. We were close. Did Catherine ever mention having problems with the defendant? Objection, Marcus Webb said. Hearsay. Your Honor, this goes to motive, Brennan argued. I'll allow it, but be careful, prosecutor. Margaret Chen nodded. Yes. Catherine told me that Lily had become difficult in the past year, demanding, entitled. Lily wanted expensive things, designer clothes, a new car. Catherine couldn't afford it. She was a single mother working as a nurse. She did her best, but it was never enough for Lily. Did Catherine mention any specific incidents? 2 weeks before she died, Catherine told me that Lily had demanded money for a trip to Europe with her friends. Catherine said no. Lily threw a tantrum. She screamed at Catherine, said terrible things. Catherine was hurt. She told me she didn't recognize her daughter anymore. Lily shook her head vigorously, mouthing the word no over and over. But Margaret Chen continued. Catherine also told me that she had been thinking about changing her will. She had a life insurance policy, $100,000, with Lily as the beneficiary. But Catherine was considering removing Lily and leaving the money to a charity instead. She said Lily needed to learn the value of money, of hard work. She said she was going to tell Lily about the change the week after she died. The courtroom was silent. The implication hung in the air. Motive. Lily had a reason to kill her mother, $100,000, and she had to do it before Catherine changed the will. Marcus Webb tried to discredit the testimony. Miss Chen, you said your sister was thinking about changing her will. Did she actually change it? No, she didn't have time. She died first. So the defendant was still the beneficiary at the time of Catherine's death? Yes. And you want us to believe that a 17-year-old girl killed her mother for insurance money based on a conversation about a hypothetical future will change? Margaret Chen's eyes filled with tears. I'm telling you what my sister told me. I'm telling you that Lily was angry about money. And I'm telling you that my sister is dead. And Lily is the one who killed her. Webb returned to his seat. Lily was sobbing again, but her eyes, when they rose from her tissue, were sharp and focused. She was watching the jury, calculating. The hearing continued. Forensic experts testified about the blood spatter patterns, the angle of the wounds, the force required. The medical examiner, Dr. Linda Foster, described Catherine's injuries in clinical detail. 3 stab wounds to the chest, 2 to the abdomen. The fatal wound had pierced her heart. Death would have been quick, but not instant. Catherine had time to know what was happening. Based on the wounds and the blood evidence, Dr. Foster said, this was not a defensive struggle. This was an attack. The victim was standing when the first blow struck. She fell. The subsequent wounds were delivered while she was on the ground. Is this consistent with an accident? Brennan asked. No, this is consistent with intentional homicide. Marcus Webb tried to argue that an argument could have escalated, that Lily could have acted in a moment of panic. But Dr. Foster's testimony was damning. The wounds showed planning, intent, force. By the end of the hearing, Judge Sullivan ruled that there was sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. The trial date was set for 6 weeks later. In the weeks between the hearing and the trial, Detective Ramos and his team worked around the clock. They conducted dozens of interviews. They examined every piece of evidence. And they worked with digital forensics to recover the deleted data from Lily's phone. The digital forensics lab was located in the basement of the Sheriff's Department building. It was a small, cluttered room filled with computers, hard drives, and cables. The lead forensics analyst was a 34-year-old woman named Sarah Patel, who had a degree in computer science and a specialty in recovering deleted data. Ramos sat beside her as she worked. "Tell me you found something," he said. Sarah nodded, her eyes on the screen. I found a lot. Lily deleted hundreds of text messages in the hours after her mother's death. Most of them are recoverable. But there's something else. Something she tried very hard to hide. What is it? A voice memo, recorded at 9:17 in the morning on April 10th, 6 hours before the estimated time of death. She deleted it at 6:30 in the evening after she called 911. Ramos leaned forward. Can you recover it? I already did. Sarah clicked a button. Do you want to hear it? Yes. Sarah pressed play. The audio was clear. It was Lily's voice. Young, calm, casual. Okay, let me practice this. Mom will be home around 3. I'll do it then. There was a pause. Then Lily's voice changed. It became high-pitched, panicked, theatrical. She was sobbing. Oh God, no, please, Mom, wake up, please. The sobbing continued for several seconds. Then it stopped abruptly, and Lily's normal voice returned. That's pretty good. If I cry hard enough, they'll believe anything. She laughed. The recording ended. Ramos sat back in his chair, stunned. She planned it. She practiced her reaction. Sarah nodded. And she recorded herself doing it. She was so confident she'd get away with it that she didn't think to delete this until after the fact. And even then, she didn't know we could recover it. This is the smoking gun, Ramos said quietly. This is what we need. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in late May. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. People stood in the hallways, hoping for a glimpse of the proceedings. The media presence was overwhelming. This was no longer just a local case. It was national news. Lily entered the courtroom in her orange jumpsuit. She looked thinner than before. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore no makeup. She looked young, vulnerable, fragile. She sat beside Marcus Webb and immediately began crying, her face buried in her hands. The jury was seated, 12 people, 7 women and 5 men, ranging in age from 23 to 67. They watched Lily with a mixture of sympathy and suspicion. Some looked at her with pity. Others looked at her with doubt. Judge Sullivan called the court to order. We are here for the trial of Lily Marie Hartwell, who is charged with first-degree murder in the death of her mother, Catherine Hartwell. Prosecutor Brennan, you may give your opening statement. Rachel Brennan stood. She walked to the center of the courtroom, her posture confident, her voice clear. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a case about deception. It is a case about a young woman who believed she was smarter than everyone else, who believed she could commit murder and get away with it, who believed that if she cried hard enough, no one would see the truth. Lily sobbed louder. Brennan ignored her. The evidence will show that Lily Hartwell planned her mother's murder. She had a motive, money, a $100,000 life insurance policy that she stood to inherit. She had opportunity. She was home alone with her mother on the afternoon of April 10th, and she had intent. She practiced her reaction. She rehearsed her story, and then she executed her plan. Brennan paused, letting the words sink in. The defense will try to convince you that this was an accident, that this was a moment of panic during an argument. But the evidence will show otherwise. The forensic evidence, the witness testimony, and most importantly, the defendant's own voice, recorded hours before the murder, planning exactly what she would do. She looked at the jury. At the end of this trial, after you have heard all the evidence, I will ask you to return a verdict of guilty, because the evidence does not lie. and neither does the defendant's own voice. Brennan sat down. Lily was crying so hard now that her entire body shook. Marcus Webb put a hand on her shoulder, but his expression was grim. "Mr. Webb, your opening statement," Judge Sullivan said. Marcus Webb stood. He was a skilled attorney, experienced and persuasive. But he knew he was fighting an uphill battle. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client is a child. She is 17 years old. She has just lost her mother in a terrible, tragic accident. And now the state wants to paint her as a monster, a calculating killer. But that is not who Lily Hartwell is." He gestured toward Lily. "Look at her. Does she look like a murderer? This is a frightened, traumatized young woman who made a terrible mistake. Yes, she lied about being home. She was scared. She panicked. But that does not make her a killer." Webb paced in front of the jury box. "The prosecution will present evidence. They will twist it to fit their narrative. They will try to make you see malice where there is only fear. But I ask you to remember that my client is innocent until proven guilty. The burden of proof is on the state. And at the end of this trial, I believe you will see that the evidence does not support a murder conviction." He sat down. Lily reached for his hand and squeezed it. He did not squeeze back. The trial proceeded. Witness after witness took the stand. Detective Ramos testified again, walking the jury through the investigation. The surveillance footage was shown. Time stamped. Undeniable. Lily's car arriving at 2:33 in the afternoon, staying until after the 911 call. Catherine's colleagues from the hospital testified. They described her as kind, hard-working, devoted to her daughter. They said she often talked about Lily with pride. They said she would never hurt her child. Lily's friends were called. One, a girl named Emma Rodriguez, was clearly uncomfortable. She took the stand and avoided looking at Lily. "Miss Rodriguez," Brennan asked, "did the defendant ever discuss her mother with you?" Emma nodded. "Yeah, she talked about her mom a lot." "What did she say?" "She complained, said her mom was cheap, said she never gave Lily what she wanted. Lily was always talking about wanting money, wanting to travel, wanting nice things." "Did she ever say anything specific about her mother's life insurance?" Emma hesitated. Then she nodded. "Yeah. About a month before Miss Hartwell died, Lily mentioned that her mom had life insurance. She said if anything happened to her mom, Lily would get $100,000. Did she say anything else?" Emma looked down at her hands. She said, "Imagine what I could do with that kind of money." And then she laughed. I thought she was joking, but now I don't know. Lily glared at Emma, her tears momentarily forgotten. Then she seemed to remember herself and resumed sobbing. Marcus Webb cross-examined Emma, trying to suggest that teenage conversations were often dark humor, that Lily never meant anything serious. But the damage was done. The jury had heard Lily talk about the money. The forensic evidence was presented next. Dr. Foster returned to the stand and walked the jury through the autopsy findings. Photographs were shown. They were graphic. Some jury members looked away. The wounds were deep, deliberate. This was not a panicked struggle. This was an attack. "Based on your examination," Brennan asked, "do you believe these injuries could have been inflicted accidentally?" "No. The force required, the angles of the wounds, the number of wounds, all indicate intentional violence. This was not an accident." The defense tried to argue that an argument could escalate, that adrenaline could account for the force, but Dr. Foster was firm. These wounds show intent to kill. As the trial progressed, Marcus Webb became increasingly frustrated with his client. During breaks, he tried to talk to Lily about her behavior. "You need to stop crying so much," he told her in a private conference room during lunch recess on day 3 of the trial. "The jury can tell it's fake. You're overdoing it." Lily's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm grieving my mother. What do you want me to do?" "I want you to be genuine, or at least convincing. Right now, you're neither." "I am convincing. I'm an excellent actress." Webb stared at her. "This is not a performance, Lily. This is your life. If you're convicted, you could spend decades in prison. Do you understand that?" Lily crossed her arms. "I'm not going to be convicted. The jury feels sorry for me. I can see it." Webb shook his head. "Some of them do. But others are watching you too closely. They're noticing things. The way you check the cameras, the way your tears stop the second you think no one is looking. You need to be more careful." "I know what I'm doing." "Do you? Because right now, it looks like you're losing." Lily stood up, her face flushed with anger. "I am not losing. I have done everything right. I planned this perfectly. I just need you to do your job and get me acquitted." Webb went cold. "What did you just say?" Lily realized her mistake. "I meant, I've been cooperative. I followed your advice. I just need you to defend me properly." But Webb had heard what he heard. His client had just admitted to planning this. He sat down heavily, his head in his hands. He was defending a guilty woman, and there was nothing he could do about it. The trial entered its second week. The prosecution's case was strong. The motive was clear. The opportunity was undeniable. The forensic evidence was damning. But Prosecutor Brennan had been saving the most important piece for last: the smoking gun, the recording that would destroy Lily's performance once and for all. During a recess on day 7 of the trial, the prosecution team gathered in their conference room. Rachel Brennan sat at the head of the table, reviewing her notes. Detective Ramos sat across from her, along with Assistant Prosecutor Michael Torres and paralegal Jennifer Kim. "We present the recording tomorrow," Brennan said, not looking up from her notes. "I want to make sure we handle this perfectly. No room for error." Torres nodded. "Sarah Patel's testimony will establish authenticity. I've gone over her qualifications 3 times. She's bulletproof." "The defense will still challenge it," Brennan said. "Webb knows this recording destroys his case. He'll throw everything at it." Ramos leaned back in his chair. "Let him try. I've listened to that recording 100 times. There's no ambiguity, no room for interpretation. It's Lily's voice. Planning murder. Practicing her fake tears. It's over." Jennifer Kim spoke up. "The jury has been watching her closely the past few days. I think some of them are already suspicious. The crying seems less effective than it was at the beginning." Brennan looked up. "That's because they're paying attention. They're noticing the patterns, the way she turns it on and off, the way she checks to see if people are watching. But the recording will remove all doubt. After tomorrow, there won't be a single juror who believes her." Torres shuffled through some papers. "I've prepared responses to every objection Webb might raise. Chain of custody is airtight. Metadata is verified. Voice analysis is conclusive. The timestamp is undeniable." "What about the defense's theory that it could be taken out of context?" Kim asked. Brennan shook her head. "There's no context that makes this recording anything other than what it is. A confession, a plan, a rehearsal. Webb can argue all he wants, but the jury will hear her words. They'll hear her laugh, and they'll know the truth. Ramos stood and walked to the window. I keep thinking about Catherine, what she must have felt in those final moments, knowing her own daughter was killing her for money. He turned back to face the group. We owe it to her to get this right. We will, Brennan said quietly. Tomorrow, we play the recording, and Lily Hartwell's performance ends. The next morning, the courtroom filled quickly. Word had spread that the prosecution was presenting critical evidence. Reporters jostled for position. Spectators lined up hours early for seats. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Lily entered with Marcus Webb. She looked pale and drawn. She had not slept well the night before. Webb had warned her that something significant was coming, but he did not know what. Or perhaps he suspected, but did not want to say. As they sat down, Lily glanced at the prosecution table. Rachel, Brennan was arranging papers with calm precision. Detective Ramos sat behind her, his expression unreadable. Lily felt a chill run down her spine. Something was different today. Something had changed. Judge Sullivan entered and called the court to order. Prosecutor Brennan, call your next witness. Brennan stood. Your Honor, the state calls Sarah Patel to the stand. Sarah Patel entered the courtroom. She was dressed professionally in a dark blue suit. Her credentials were read into the record. Bachelor's degree in computer science, master's degree in digital forensics, 8 years of experience with the Brookhaven County Sheriff's Department, certified expert in mobile device forensics and data recovery. Brennan approached the witness stand. Miss Patel, can you explain to the jury what digital forensics entails? Sarah nodded. Digital forensics is the process of recovering and analyzing data from electronic devices. In criminal cases, this often involves examining phones, computers, and other devices to find evidence. This can include recovering deleted files, analyzing metadata, and verifying the authenticity of digital evidence. And you examined the defendant's phone in this case? Yes. I received the phone from Detective Ramos on April 13th, 3 days after the incident. It was delivered to me in a sealed evidence bag with proper chain of custody documentation. What did you do with the phone? I created a forensic image of the device. This is a complete, bit-by-bit copy of all data on the phone. This allows me to examine the contents without altering the original device. I then analyzed this image using specialized forensic software. Brennan nodded. What did you find? I found extensive deleted data, text messages, photos, search history, and one voice memo file. Lily's breathing quickened. Webb noticed and leaned toward her, whispering. She shook her head frantically. Let's focus on the voice memo, Brennan said. Can you describe this file? The file was a voice memo recording lasting approximately 32 seconds. It was created on April 10th, 2024, at 9:17 in the morning. The file was deleted on the same day at 6:32 in the evening. How were you able to determine these times? Sarah explained the technical details. Every digital file contains metadata. This includes information about when the file was created, modified, accessed, and deleted. This metadata is embedded in the file and is very difficult to falsify. In this case, the metadata clearly showed the creation time as 9:17 in the morning and the deletion time as 6:32 in the evening on April 10th. Is there any possibility this metadata could be incorrect? No. I verified it against multiple sources. The phone system logs, the file system timestamps, and the metadata within the file itself all confirmed the same times. Additionally, the phone's clock was synchronized with cellular network time, which is highly accurate. Brennan walked back to the prosecution table and picked up a document. "Your Honor, may I approach the witness?" "You may." Brennan handed the document to Sarah. "Miss Patel, is this your forensic report on the defendant's phone?" Sarah examined it. "Yes, this is my complete analysis, including my findings regarding the voice memo." "And were you able to authenticate the voice on this recording?" "Yes. I sent the recording to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Audio Analysis Laboratory. They performed a voice biometric analysis, comparing the voice on the recording to known samples of the defendant's voice, including her 911 call and statements to police. The analysis concluded with 99.7% certainty that the voice on the recording belongs to the defendant. The courtroom was completely silent. Every eye was on Sarah Patel. Every ear was listening. Brennan continued. "Were you able to recover the actual audio file?" "Yes. Despite being deleted, the file data remained on the phone's storage until it was overwritten by new data. I was able to recover the complete file intact." "And have you listened to this recording?" "Yes. Multiple times." "Can you describe what you heard?" Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. "The recording contains the defendant's voice. She appears to be practicing something. She speaks in her normal voice, then switches to crying and sobbing, then returns to her normal voice. In her normal voice, she makes statements about planning something and about crying to make people believe her." Lily was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. Webb was writing furiously on his legal pad. Brennan turned to face the jury. "Miss Patel, in your expert opinion, is this recording authentic?" "Yes, absolutely. There is no evidence of tampering, editing, or fabrication. This is a genuine recording made on the defendant's phone at the time indicated." On the 8th day of the trial, Brennan called Sarah Patel to the stand. Sarah was nervous, but her credentials were impeccable. She explained her role as a digital forensics analyst. She described the process of recovering deleted data from phones. She walked the jury through the technical details in language they could understand. "Miss Patel," Brennan asked, "did you examine the defendant's phone?" "Yes, I recovered deleted data from the device." "What did you find?" "I found hundreds of deleted text messages. I found deleted photos, and I found a deleted voice memo recorded on the morning of April 10th at 9:17 in the morning." The courtroom went silent. Lily's crying stopped abruptly. She stared at Sarah Patel with wide eyes. "Were you able to authenticate this voice memo?" Brennan asked. "Yes. I verified the metadata, the timestamp, and the voice. The recording was made on the defendant's phone at the time indicated, and the voice on the recording matches the defendant's voice patterns with 99.7% certainty." "How can you be sure the recording wasn't tampered with or fabricated?" Sarah explained the technical details: hash values, metadata, file creation timestamps, chain of custody. She was thorough, methodical, and credible. The jury listened intently. "Miss Patel, were you able to determine when this recording was deleted?" "Yes, it was deleted at 6:32 in the evening on April 10th. Approximately an hour and 20 minutes after the defendant called 911 to report her mother's death." Brennan nodded. "Your Honor, at this time, the state would like to present Exhibit 47, the voice memo recovered from the defendant's phone." Judge Sullivan looked at the defense table. "Mr. Webb, any objection?" Webb stood. He knew he had to object, but he also knew it was futile. "Your Honor, we object to this evidence. The provenance is questionable. The recovery process could have introduced errors. This evidence is prejudicial and should be excluded." Judge Sullivan turned to Sarah. "Miss Patel, walk me through your recovery process one more time. I want to understand exactly how you obtained this file." Sarah nodded. "When a file is deleted from a phone, it's not immediately erased. The phone simply marks that space as available for new data. Until new data overwrites it, the original file remains recoverable. I used a forensic tool called Celebrite UFED to create an image of the phone's storage. This tool is industry standard and widely accepted in courts. It creates a bit-by-bit copy without altering anything on the original device. And then, I used forensic analysis software to scan the image for deleted files. The voice memo was found in the deleted files partition. I extracted it using write-protected methods, meaning I could not have accidentally altered it. I then calculated a cryptographic hash of the file. A hash is like a digital fingerprint. It's unique to that specific file. Any alteration, even changing a single bit, would produce a different hash. Did you verify this hash? Yes, multiple times. On different computers, the hash remained identical. This proves the file I recovered is exactly the file that was deleted. No alterations, no corruption. Judge Sullivan nodded slowly. And the voice analysis? The Federal Bureau of Investigation performed the analysis. They used voice biometric software that measures unique characteristics of a person's voice: pitch, tone, cadence, phonetic patterns. These characteristics are as unique as fingerprints. The analysis compared the voice on the recording to the defendant's known voice samples. The match was 99.7%. That's as close to absolute certainty as voice analysis can provide. Judge Sullivan looked at Webb. "Mr. Webb, do you have evidence suggesting this analysis was flawed?" Webb hesitated. "No, Your Honor. But we maintain that the prejudicial nature of this evidence outweighs its probative value." "The probative value is extremely high," Judge Sullivan said. "This recording, if authentic, goes directly to the defendant's state of mind and intent. Miss Patel has established authenticity through multiple methods. Your objection is overruled. The state may present the evidence." Webb sat down heavily. Lily grabbed his arm, her fingernails digging into his sleeve. "Stop them," she hissed. "You have to stop them." "I can't," Webb whispered back. "It's over." Brennan walked to the evidence table and picked up a small digital audio player. She connected it to the courtroom's sound system. The room was completely silent. Every eye was on the speaker. Lily sat frozen in her chair, her face pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table so hard her fingers ached. Brennan pressed play. The recording began. Lily's voice filled the courtroom. Young, calm, casual. "Okay, let me practice this. Mom will be home around 3. I'll do it then." There was a pause. Then the tone changed. Lily's voice became high-pitched, panicked. She was sobbing. Oh God, no, please, Mom. Wake up, please." The sobbing was intense, dramatic. It sounded exactly like the crying she had done in court. Then the sobbing stopped, abruptly. Lily's normal voice returned. "That's pretty good. If I cry hard enough, they'll believe anything." She laughed. The recording ended. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. No one moved, no one breathed. Then slowly, a murmur began. Gasps, whispers, shock rippling through the gallery. Lily's face drained of all color. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her hands, which had been gripping the table, began to tremble violently. She looked at Marcus Webb, her eyes wide with panic. Webb stared at her with an expression of resignation and disgust. The jury members were staring at Lily. Their faces showed shock, anger, betrayal. The sympathy that some had felt was gone. In its place was revulsion. Judge Sullivan banged her gavel. Order. Order in the court. But the damage was done. Lily's own voice had betrayed her. The performance was over. Brennan let the silence hang for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but clear. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the defendant's voice, recorded 6 hours before she killed her mother, practicing her fake sobs, planning her story. She even told us exactly what she was doing. If I cry hard enough, they'll believe anything. But she was wrong. We didn't believe her, and neither should you. Lily began to cry. But this time, the tears were different. These were real. These were the tears of someone whose carefully constructed lie had just collapsed. She sobbed into her hands, her shoulders shaking, but no one in the courtroom felt sympathy for her anymore. They had heard the truth. Marcus Webb cross-examined Sarah Patel, but it was a formality. He tried to suggest the recording could have been taken out of context. He tried to argue that Lily might have been joking, or making a dark comment, or expressing grief in an unusual way. But the recording was clear, undeniable. Lily had planned the murder. She had practiced her reaction, and she had executed her plan exactly as rehearsed. The trial continued for another 2 days. The defense presented their case, such as it was. They called character witnesses who testified that Lily had been a good student, a good friend, a good daughter. But their testimony rang hollow after the recording. How could Lily be a good daughter when she had murdered her own mother for money? The closing arguments were brief. Brennan summarized the evidence methodically, the motive, the opportunity, the forensic proof, and most importantly, the recording. Lily's own voice condemning her. The defendant believed she was clever enough to fool everyone, Brennan said. She believed her tears would be enough. She believed that if she played the victim convincingly enough, no one would see her for what she really is. A killer, a liar, a manipulator. But the evidence does not lie. And at the end of the day, the truth always comes out. Marcus Webb tried his best. He argued that the case was circumstantial. He argued that the recording could be interpreted differently. He argued that the jury should have reasonable doubt. But even he knew it was over. His client was guilty, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, their faces were solemn. The foreperson, a 54-year-old woman named Patricia Moore, stood and read the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant, Lily Marie Hartwell, guilty of murder in the first degree. Lily collapsed. She fell forward onto the defense table, wailing. But this time, her cries went ignored. The jury had spoken. The truth had won. Judge Sullivan scheduled sentencing for 1 week later. In the interim, Lily was returned to juvenile or detention. She did not eat. She did not sleep. She stared at the ceiling of her cell and replayed the recording in her mind. Her own voice, her own words. She had destroyed herself. The sentencing hearing was held on a Friday morning. The courtroom was once again packed. Lily entered in her orange jumpsuit. She looked hollow, defeated. The arrogance was gone. The performance had ended. All that remained was a frightened girl facing the consequences of her actions. Before sentencing, victim impact statements were read. Catherine's sister, Margaret Chen, spoke first. She walked to the podium slowly, her hands shaking. She looked at Lily, with tears streaming down her face. "Lily, I loved you like my own daughter," Margaret said, her voice breaking. "Catherine loved you more than anything in this world. She worked so hard to give you everything you needed. She sacrificed so much for you. And you killed her. You planned it. You practiced it. And then you killed her for money." Margaret wiped her eyes. "You didn't just take my sister from me. You destroyed my family. My children lost their aunt. I lost my best friend. And for what? $100,000. Was that worth it, Lily? Was it worth your mother's life?" Lily stared at the table, silent. No tears, no performance, nothing. Catherine's colleagues from the hospital spoke. They described the hole Catherine's death had left in their workplace, in their lives. They talked about how kind she had been, how dedicated, how much she had loved being a mother. They looked at Lily with a mixture of anger and profound sadness. Finally, Emma Rodriguez spoke. She walked to the podium and looked at Lily. "I thought you were my friend," Emma said quietly. "I trusted you. I believed you. And the whole time, you were lying. You killed your mum, and you tried to make us all feel sorry for you. I'll never forgive you for that." When the victim impact statements were finished, Judge Sullivan turned to Lily. "Miss Hartwell, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence?" Lily stood. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry." Judge Sullivan's expression hardened. "You're sorry?" "Miss Hartwell, I have presided over this court for 20 years. I have seen many defendants stand where you are standing now. I have heard many apologies, but I have rarely seen someone as calculating, as manipulative, as utterly devoid of genuine remorse as you." Lily flinched. Judge Sullivan continued, her voice rising. "This court has watched your performance for weeks. We have watched you cry on cue. We have watched you check the cameras to make sure you were being seen. We have watched you play the victim, the traumatized child, the grieving daughter, and we have seen through every single moment of it." The judge leaned forward. "The recording presented by the state is not just evidence of your guilt. It is a window into your soul, or rather, the absence of one. You sat in your room and practiced fake sobs. You planned your mother's murder like it was a school project, and then you laughed. You laughed because you thought you were smarter than everyone else. You thought your tears would be enough." Lily was crying now, genuine tears of fear and despair. But Judge Sullivan did not stop. "You took the life of a woman who loved you unconditionally, a woman who worked herself to exhaustion to provide for you, a woman whose only crime was failing to give you everything you wanted, exactly when you wanted it. And you killed her, not in a moment of passion, not in self-defense. You killed her because you wanted her money, because you were impatient, because you are selfish, narcissistic, and cruel." The courtroom was silent. Every word hit like a hammer. "You have shown no genuine remorse. Even now, in this moment, I do not believe your tears are for your mother. I believe they are for yourself. You are crying because you were caught, because your plan failed, because you are facing consequences for the first time in your entitled life." Judge Sullivan picked up a document. "The law requires me to impose a sentence that reflects the severity of your crime and protects society from further harm. You took a life. You destroyed a family. You lied to investigators, to this court, and to the community. You attempted to manipulate the justice system with your theatrical performance. She looked directly at Lily. You are 17 years old. Some might argue that you deserve leniency because of your age, but age does not excuse premeditation. Age does not excuse planning. Age does not excuse murder. Judge Sullivan read from the sentencing document. It is the judgment of this court that you, Lily Marie Hartwell, be sentenced to 25 years to life in the juvenile detention system, with transfer to adult corrections upon reaching the age of 21. You will be eligible for parole after serving 25 years. However, given the calculated nature of your crime, I strongly doubt parole will be granted. You will spend the majority, if not all, of your remaining life in prison. Lily's legs gave out. She collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Marcus Webb steadied her, but his expression was empty. He had done his job. He had defended her. But even he felt no sympathy for her now. Judge Sullivan was not finished. I want you to understand something, Miss Hartwell. Justice cannot be performed. Truth cannot be manipulated. You believed you could cry your way out of murder. You believed that if you acted vulnerable enough, convincing enough, sympathetic enough, you would walk free. You were wrong. She set down the document. Your mother is gone. She will never see another sunrise. She will never laugh again, or work again, or love again. You took all of that from her. And for what? Money that you will never spend. A freedom you will never enjoy. You traded your mother's life for nothing. Judge Sullivan's final words were quiet, but devastating. You will have decades in prison to think about what you have done, to think about the woman you killed, the family you destroyed, the lies you told. And I hope, though I doubt, that someday you will feel genuine remorse, that someday you will understand the magnitude of your crime, that someday you will become something more than the narcissistic, manipulative child who sat in this courtroom and thought tears would be enough. She banged her gavel. Sentence is imposed. Bailiff, remove the defendant. This court is adjourned. The bailiffs approached Lily. She was still crying, her face buried in her hands. They lifted her to her feet and placed handcuffs on her wrists. The metal clicked shut. The sound was final. Lily looked around the courtroom one last time. The media cameras were still recording. The gallery was still full. But no one was looking at her with sympathy anymore. They were looking at her with disgust, with anger, with satisfaction that justice had been served. She was led through the side door, the same door she had been led through after every hearing, after every day of trial. But this time was different. This time she would not return. This time the performance was truly over. The door closed behind her with a heavy metallic thud. The sound echoed in the silent courtroom. And then she was gone. In the weeks and months that followed, the case became a national talking point. Legal experts analyzed the trial on cable news. Psychologists discussed narcissistic personality disorder in teenagers. Communities debated how such a young person could commit such a calculated crime. The recording was played repeatedly on news programs. Lily's voice, calm and casual, planning murder. If I cry hard enough, they'll believe anything. It became a symbol of manipulation, of the danger of believing appearances over evidence. Law schools began using the case in their criminal procedure courses. The Hartwell case became a textbook example of digital forensics, chain of custody, and the importance of recovering deleted evidence. Sarah Patel was invited to speak at conferences across the country, explaining her methods and the technology that had brought a killer to justice. The case also sparked debates about how teenagers are prosecuted for serious crimes. Some argued that Lily's age should have been a mitigating factor, that 17-year-olds lack the brain development to fully understand consequences. Others pointed to the recording, the planning, the calculated manipulation, and argued that age was irrelevant when the crime was so premeditated. Catherine Hartwell's colleagues established a scholarship fund in her name. It was awarded annually to nursing students who demonstrated compassion, dedication, and genuine kindness. The kind of qualities Catherine had embodied, the kind of qualities her daughter had lacked. The first scholarship was awarded 6 months after the trial to a young woman named Maria Santos, who broke down in tears when she learned about Catherine's story. She promised to honor Catherine's memory by being the kind of nurse Catherine had been, selfless, kind, devoted to helping others. Margaret Chen became an advocate for victims' families. She spoke at conferences and community events, telling Catherine's story, warning about the dangers of assuming youth equals innocence. She worked with lawmakers to strengthen victim impact statement laws, arguing that families deserve to be heard to tell the court about the person they had lost. She channeled her grief into action, and in doing so, found a way to honor her sister's memory. At one speaking engagement at a victim advocacy conference, Margaret told the audience, "My sister was murdered by the person she loved most in the world, the person she sacrificed everything for. And that person sat in court and cried fake tears while accusing Catherine of abuse. That person tried to destroy my sister's memory to save herself. But the truth came out. Evidence doesn't lie. And Catherine's memory is intact. She was a good person, a loving person, and nothing Lily said or did can change that." The Brookhaven County community was forever changed by the case. Neighbors who had known the Hartwells were shocked, traumatized, struggling to reconcile the polite teenager they had known with the calculating killer revealed in court. Some felt guilty for not seeing the signs. Others wondered if there had been signs at all. Detective Paul Ramos retired 2 years after the trial. He had solved dozens of cases in his career, but the Hartwell case stayed with him. He often thought about that moment in the forensics lab when he first heard the recording. The shock of hearing Lily's voice, so calm, so calculating. It had confirmed what he suspected from the beginning. But hearing it was different. Hearing it made it real. In his retirement speech to the department, Ramos said, "I've learned that evil doesn't always look evil. Sometimes it looks like a crying teenager. Sometimes it looks vulnerable and young and sympathetic. But evidence reveals truth. Science reveals truth. Our job is to find that evidence, preserve it, and present it. We did that in the Hartwell case, and Catherine Hartwell got justice because of it." Marcus Webb continued practicing law, but he never took another juvenile murder case. He could not forget the look in Lily's eyes when she told him she had planned everything perfectly. He could not forget defending someone he knew was guilty. It haunted him. In quiet moments, he would remember her voice. "I planned this perfectly." Those words echoed in his mind. He began focusing on civil litigation instead. Contract disputes, business disagreements, cases where the truth was ambiguous and both sides had legitimate claims. Cases where he did not have to look at victims' families and argue that their loved one's killer deserved leniency. Sarah Patel, the forensics analyst, was promoted to lead the county's digital forensics unit. Her work on the Hartwell case was held up as an example of excellent digital forensics. She recovered evidence that had been deliberately hidden. She authenticated it beyond any doubt, and she helped bring a killer to justice. But she also understood the weight of her work. She had listened to that recording dozens of times while verifying its authenticity. Each time she heard Lily's laugh, that casual, confident laugh. It chilled her. Sarah knew that her work had put a 17-year-old girl in prison for most of her life. She believed it was the right outcome. The evidence demanded it. But it still weighed on her. In an interview with a forensics technology magazine, Sarah said, "People think digital forensics is just about computers and software, but it's about people. It's about finding truth when someone tries to hide it." In the Hartwell case, the defendant thought deleting a file meant it was gone forever. But digital data is persistent. It leaves traces, and those traces told the truth. Lily Hartwell remained in juvenile detention for 4 years. When she turned 21, she was transferred to Ohio Reformatory for Women. She was assigned a cell, a job in the prison laundry, and a counselor who tried to help her process her crime. The prison was a stark, institutional building surrounded by high fences and razor wire. Lily's cell was 8 by 10 feet, a narrow bed, a small desk, a metal toilet, a single window that looked out onto the prison yard. This would be her home for decades. During her intake process, the prison psychologist, Dr. Ellen Morrison, interviewed Lily. The session was mandatory for all new inmates. "How are you adjusting to being here?" Dr. Morrison asked. Lily shrugged. "It's fine. You were just convicted of murdering your mother. That's not something most people describe as fine." "I don't want to talk about it." Dr. Morrison made a note. "Lily, I'm here to help you, but I can't help you if you won't engage. Part of your rehabilitation involves acknowledging what you did and why you did it." "I know what I did," Lily said flatly. "Do you understand why?" "Because I wanted the money." Dr. Morrison leaned forward. "That's the practical reason. But I'm asking about the emotional reason. Your mother loved you, raised you, cared for you. How were you able to kill her?" Lily looked away. "I don't know." "Do you feel remorse?" "I feel like I got caught." Dr. Morrison wrote that down. After the session, she filed a report noting that Lily showed limited emotional affect regarding her crime, absence of genuine remorse, and narcissistic tendencies. The report recommended long-term psychological treatment and noted that Lily posed a risk for manipulation of both staff and other inmates. But Lily did not want to process. She did not want to accept responsibility. Even years later, in the privacy of her cell, she still believed she had been smart. She still believed her plan had been good. She had just been unlucky. The recording should have been deleted permanently. Sarah Patel should not have been able to recover it. That was the only reason she had been caught. She never expressed genuine remorse for killing her mother. She never cried real tears for Catherine. In group therapy sessions, she performed grief, just as she had performed it in court. But the other inmates saw through it. They knew what she was, and they avoided her. One inmate, a woman named Denise Carter, who was serving time for armed robbery, confronted Lily in the cafeteria 6 months into her sentence. "You think you're smart," Denise said, sitting across from Lily uninvited. "You think you're fooling people with your sad face." Lily looked up from her tray. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, you do. You killed your mum for money. Then you tried to cry your way out of it. I watched your trial on TV. I heard that recording. You're a monster. Leave me alone. Everyone in here knows what you are. You're not special. You're not clever. You're just a spoiled kid who thought she could get away with murder. And you couldn't. Now you're here with the rest of us. And you'll be here for the rest of your life. Denise stood and walked away. Lily sat alone, staring at her food. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but she had no defense. Everything Denise said was true. Lily would be eligible for parole when she was 42 years old, 25 years after she had killed her mother. The parole board would review her case. They would ask if she had been rehabilitated, if she understood the severity of her crime, if she felt remorse. And when that day came, they would listen to the recording again. Her voice, 17 years old, planning murder. If I cry hard enough, they'll believe anything, and they would review her prison record, her lack of genuine remorse, her continued manipulation attempts, her refusal to accept responsibility, and they would deny her parole. Because the recording did not lie, and neither did the evidence, and neither did the truth that Lily Hartwell had spent decades trying to hide. She was a killer. She had always been a killer, and no performance, no matter how practiced, could change that fact. The courtroom where Lily had been tried and sentenced remained in use. Other cases were heard there. Other defendants sat in the same chair where Lily had sat. Other verdicts were read. Other sentences were imposed. But the people who had been in the courtroom that day, who had heard the recording, who had watched Lily's mask fall away, never forgot. They remembered the moment the truth was revealed. They remembered the silence, the shock, the recognition that evil could wear the face of a crying teenager. And they remembered Judge Sullivan's words. Justice cannot be performed. Those words became a reminder, a warning, a truth that transcended any single case. Judge Sullivan herself retired 5 years after the Hartwell trial. In her final address to the court, she reflected on her career. I have presided over thousands of cases. I have seen the best and worst of humanity. But the Hartwell case taught me something important. Truth is not about appearance. It's not about who cries the hardest or who seems most sympathetic. Truth is about evidence, facts, reality. And our job as officers of this court is to seek that truth, no matter how well it's hidden or how convincingly it's obscured. The evidence had spoken. The truth had won. And Lily Hartwell, the girl who thought she could cry her way out of murder, had learned the hardest lesson of all. Tears were not enough. They had never been enough. And they never would be.